This is WWE superstar Drew McIntyre, and you're listening to the WWE Podcast.
The champ is
the one that everybody wants, me.
Becky Lynch is going to WrestleMania. Claymore!
Austin 316 says I just whipped your ass.
This is my idol. You're going to acknowledge me.
All right, everybody, welcome to the WWE Podcast, and I've got Anthony DeMarco here with me tonight, and you guys know him from What If, and now it's WWE Retro that he has rebranded his show as, and this past week he did a show, just so you know, about WWE's, WWF at the time, program where Undertaker was forcing Stephanie McMahon to marry him in the Black Wedding, and Stone Cold saved her, and I really enjoyed that segment in the podcast as well. But Anthony, tonight we're here to talk about 2022, and we're here to talk about some updated predictions about Brock, when he's coming back, brand split, Roman. I mean, this is going to be a fun podcast, so welcome back.
Thanks, man. Good to be back. And yeah, 2022 is shaping up to be a year that I think is going to be pretty uncertain in WWE. I remember when I came on here a few weeks ago and we were kind of like talking about the build to WrestleMania 38 and specifically the main event of Brock versus Roman and the unification match and the biggest biggest main event of all time, biggest WrestleMania match of all time, whatever the hell they were calling it towards the end. And I said that it felt like they were just pouring everything they had into this match, and that like this was going to be the big finale and they were going to have no idea where to go with it once it was done. They were just kicking that can down the road. There was no long-term thinking behind this booking, behind this storyline, behind the branding of the match, behind the unification, and then they were just going to deal with the outcome once it was over. And now that we're a week in and we've had one Raw and one SmackDown following the, quote, biggest WrestleMania match of all time, it kind of feels like they don't have a specific road carved out for Roman Reigns following him becoming the undisputed Universal Champion.
No, they don't. I mean, I do wonder, too, if Rick Boogs never got injured in his match, which was legit at WrestleMania, I believe they were slated, Shinsuke and Boogs were slated to win the tag belts, which means Shinsuke would not have interrupted Roman Reigns this past week, which makes me think, okay, if that injury never happened, they don't get the belts, who would have interrupted Roman Reigns? I mean, this may have been a very happy accident that fell into WWE's lap now that Shinsuke doesn't have a tag team partner in Boogs, which I really feel bad for the guy given all the momentum he had and the organic love that the audience had for him. But I'm also wondering if WWE's kind of breathing a sigh of relief of like, whoa, okay, well, we have an opponent for the next month or two for Roman. Granted, he has literally no chance to beat Roman, but at least it'll be a fun program. It elevates Shinsuke for a little while. And do you feel that same way that maybe if that injury didn't happen, that Shinsuke wouldn't have interrupted Roman? And if he didn't, who would have?
Well, I mean, I keep coming back to Drew McIntyre. Like, I just feel like eventually that's where it's going to get to. Like, they've had kind of a 18-month-long program that, like, waiting for them to use that's kind of gone dormant since Survivor Series of 2020. And obviously they spend a lot of 2021, more so the latter half of it, investing into rebranding, or not so much rebranding Drew, but rebuilding Drew, getting him away from the title picture, away from the main event. And look, you know, he spent, I think, far too long with Happy Corbin and Madcap Moss. Even going back to Summerslam of last year, he had the one-on-one match with Jinder Mahal. So I do understand what they were doing with Drew McIntyre, and you spoke to it at length on your shows, and how this was needed. You couldn't just keep force-feeding Drew in the main event and world championship picture. But now I think it's almost getting to a point that, like, you just have to get there eventually. Like, it's been 6 months now that Drew McIntyre has been on SmackDown with Roman Reigns, and they have not crossed paths once. And it's just getting to a point for me, and now it seems like maybe Sami Zayn and Drew will have a small program. And at this point, I guess they're going to build towards SummerSlam, because you're not going to throw Drew McIntyre and Roman Reigns away at a Backlash pay-per-view or Money in the Bank or Hell in a Cell, like a B-level pay-per-view as such. But, I mean, had Rick Boogs not gotten hurt, maybe it would have been Shinsuke Nakamura all the same, because, okay, aside from Drew McIntyre, who I don't think they would have gone to right away, who is the next babyface in line over on SmackDown?
I don't know. I mean, outside of rehashing an old rivalry, I don't know who they would have gone to. And I think that the whole problem with Drew is just exactly like you said. They want to make sure that they have their biggest party of the summer, their biggest pay-per-view of the summer, their second WrestleMania that it's now kind of been branded as, making sure that they have that main event set, which means Roman Reigns and Drew McIntyre. They have to go there for SummerSlam. So they want to make sure that they have that set, and they have their main event set for SummerSlam, so they don't have to scramble in a couple of months when they're like, oh crap, we don't have someone ready for Roman. So I don't think, just like you, that we're going to see anybody challenging, at least if they do, in any kind of real threat, a real threatening way to have Roman lose until Drew gets there. And Drew could very well be the first guy in a long time that has the real chance of defeating Roman Reigns, and he could actually be that guy that does take the belt off Roman, and I'd be totally fine with that. But I do also wonder, is Roman going to defend this belt as a singular belt, or is it going to be defended in pieces like they did with the Raw and SmackDown Women's Championship a couple of years ago? Even they said it's unified, yet he has two physical belts. Maybe they haven't got to actually developing one belt, or they'll keep two and tell you it's one. Do you think that even if Drew beats him, is it for one? Is it two? How do they split that up?
Well, the verbiage that they're using would lead you to believe that it's one, right? Like, they're calling it one specific championship. It's kind of like when they unified the World Heavyweight and WWE Championship in, what was it, December of 2013 between Cena and Randy Orton. They were the WWE World Heavyweight Champion. And another thing, quickly on this, because this is the third time that they've unified world championships, going back to the WWF and WCW Championship, the WWE Championship, and the World Heavyweight Championship, now Universal and WWE. Eventually, if this is what they're doing again, it will go back to being known as the WWE Championship. We all know that, right? Like, it's been done twice before. It's going to be the WWE Championship. And to be honest, I think one of the reasons why they did this unification, if it does in fact hold to be true that it is one title, is because they didn't like the fact that the WWE Championship was no longer the most prestigious championship in the company. That's one of my beliefs. But back to your first question, is that will they defend it individually or together? I think it's going to be together, because I don't think that they believe that they have enough star power to hold a world title on each show. I disagree with that. I think what they've done is that they've made it such. I think the way they've booked Roman has given them no choice but to have one world champion, because for the last 12 months or so, they've booked Roman so much superior to any WWE champion that they've had, even kind of including Brock, although it didn't really feel like he was the WWE champion. As soon as he became the champion, it just felt like there was no Raw World Champion, because it was just almost exclusively a SmackDown program. I think that it could have been okay. Like, I think, like, we talked about it at length with the guy like Seth Rollins. I think that you could have made Seth Rollins feel as big as Roman Reigns. I think Bobby Lashley was a damn good WWE champion. I'm not a huge fan of Big E, but I just think that they put no real effort into billing him as a true world champion. So I think that them just putting such little effort into building a significant world champion on the Raw side of things, but backed themselves into a corner where they had no choice but to make one world champion to not risk devaluing the WWE championship. And then that kind of would lead me to my next question that we'll pitch to you. Do you think that they've booked Roman Reigns so strongly over the last 18 months or so, you know, running through guys like Brock Lesnar and especially John Cena, effectively squashing him at last year's SummerSlam, The Rock being nowhere in sight, beating Edge and Daniel Bryan, Finn Balor, all these guys, that they've booked themselves into a corner with Roman Reigns?
Well, they've certainly run through the roster other than Drew McIntyre and Shinsuke, but we all know Shinsuke is just going to get steamrolled. They have run out of people on the roster on SmackDown, which is my biggest belief why they quote-unquote unified these belts, is because it opens up the other half of the roster for Roman to work with that he hasn't worked with in a while. I mean, he's got unfinished business with Seth. Yes, Seth is a heel, but their matchup that they had at Survivor Series was really, really good, and there's unfinished business with Roman beating down Seth at the end of that match that we all are just supposed to forget about. So I think it opens up a totally new set of guys for him to work with, and will keep it fresh enough to get to the next brand split. Now, with the next brand split, I mean, I don't know if there even is one. I mean, that could be the next question that we have here, but I think that Roman Reigns right now, is he being booked so strong that they've booked themselves into a corner? Well, he's not squashing people like Omos is, where it's not competitive. I mean, Brock Lesnar came within an inch of beating Roman Reigns. I mean, Kevin Owens, when he had his 3 or 4 matches against Roman Reigns, came, oh my God, how close did he come to winning the championship? And, even Finn Balor, if the rope didn't break, which it was supposed to, but if it didn't, and he had hit the coup de grace, would he have won that match? I mean, so Roman has gotten lucky with a few instances during matches. He had Paul Heyman help him. He's had the Usos be able to help him. He's shown vulnerability. It's not that they're booking him as Superman, where he's totally impenetrable like Omos, until Bobby Lashley, of course, but they're not building him like that. They're showing weaknesses. They're showing vulnerability. He beat Brock clean for the most part of WrestleMania, but more often than not, he needs help, or he needs Lady Luck to help him hold on to that championship. So I don't think they're booking themselves into a corner where there's nobody that's feasible to beat him, that in your mind isn't. But they're running out of people on SmackDown, which is why they've opened up the whole roster to Raw. Drew is set for likely SummerSlam and has a very good chance of actually beating him. And yeah, I mean, The Rock again. I'm done talking about The Rock until it's real. I've booked myself into a corner with The Rock. I'm tired of talking about it. I have made myself a fool on the show for talking about him so many times. I mean, I thought the Golden Egg was leading to The Rock. I mean, I thought he was going to show up at the Rumble and win the Rumble. Then I thought he was going to show up at WrestleMania after the match. And The Rock is, I guess, too busy, taking selfies in the gym or whatever he does. And I know he's working with the XFL. Obviously, he's owned the XFL. But so he's got another project on his plate. But I'm tired of talking about it because it's just disappointment after disappointment with The Rock. That said, though, I mean, yeah. So do I think they're booking themselves into a corner? I hate to split the answer here, but yes and no. Yes, in the fact that they've run through the roster on SmackDown, but no, because they've also shown vulnerability. There is kryptonite to Superman here. There are guys that can beat him.
Yeah, I agree on that front. When I said booking themselves into a corner, I felt like more in the sense of they've invested so much time into Roman that it feels like every other wrestler plays second fiddle to him. And I guess that's kind of the point. But, I was watching 1999 wrestling from 23 years ago, right, on the WWE network. And obviously Steve Austin was the guy. But right under Steve Austin, you had The Rock. And then a smidge under The Rock, you had guys like Taker and Triple H, Shawn Michaels when he was healthy, even Mankind for a bit. And there was always kind of a believability that he was going to lose, Steve Austin, that is. And with Roman Reigns, I feel like it's gone to the point that even a guy like Seth Rollins, who I think could easily be the top guy in the company. I think that he has all the tools to be a world champion on Monday Night Raw all on his own. But I feel like even with a guy like Seth Rollins, there's such a big gap between Roman and Seth. Even a guy like Drew McIntyre, who I agree probably is your only option here, unless you're waiting for a guy like Braun Breaker to come up. But at that point, you're probably looking until next year's WrestleMania. I think Drew is your only other option. But I think that there's such a big discrepancy between where Drew stands and where Roman stands. Even a guy like Lashley, who I thought the way they built up Bobby Lashley in 2021 was arguably their best work of the entire year. And that's saying something based on how brilliant Roman was. I think that there's such a huge difference between where Lashley is and where Roman is. So I guess when I say that they've booked themselves into the corner, I mean from the standpoint as it feels as though it's Roman on the top of the hill and then everyone else so far beneath him. And I guess on some level it's supposed to feel that way because he is the world champion. But I also feel that maybe, just maybe, they've swung too far in that direction.
It's certainly very top heavy, and you're right. I mean, like with that all-star roster in the late 90s, early 2000s, even into the Ruthless Aggression era, there were many very high level, top tier, ultra talented, future Hall of Fame talents that were there on a weekly basis that we took for granted. And right now, it's Roman Reigns, and then there's it's a fairly large drop off to the next tier. And there's good and bad to that. Number one, the good part is you have your established face of the company, no doubt about it. This is our guy. There's no question. Sometimes there's ambiguity and you're not sure. And it's who is it? It's Roman. I mean, period, end of subject. So that's a good thing because you want somebody to be the face of the company, and you have that. But on the same side of the coin here, on the other side, you have everybody else. Well, what's the problem with having everybody else? They get mishmashed into the same level of obscurity at times, or 50-50 booking, or into programs that feel beneath them, like Drew has been in programs for many, many months now that you're okay, can we just elevate him? Can we just move up? I know they're saving him. They know that's the race in the hole, but Drew has felt a bit demoted for the time being. And yeah, I mean, that's the problem is that next level, there's 10 guys that are there that, if Roman didn't exist, they would be your top talent. And they feel like they are lower than maybe they should be because of how much attention WWE has given Roman Reigns. And Roman Reigns' entrance is longer than some matches on the show. I mean, Roman Reigns' entrance is 5 minutes long. It's crazy. You see 10 minutes left in the show, and I skip ahead to 4 minutes because I know the first 6 minutes is going to be his entrance. And so they have given him main event spot after main event spot after main event spot, and I think they've done an excellent job. But yeah, I think that the problem is that I think it's more of a problem than it is a positive that there are just this megastar that they put all their chips into, and then there's everybody else. But you could also make the case he's helped elevate new stars in losses. I mean, that's the goal anyway, but in the interest of time, I do want to ask you, related though, do you think that Brock Lesnar is going to return for SummerSlam? I mean, that seems to be Brock's MO. He gets brought in, late in the year. He gets into Rumble season. He wins the Rumble. He goes to WrestleMania. He loses, and then he goes away until SummerSlam. I mean, that seems to be Brock Lesnar's life in pro wrestling these days. Do you think it's the same thing this time around, where he shows up somewhere around SummerSlam time?
It's going to depend if they can build up a worthy storyline for him in time. And with that being said, I think we may not see Brock until the Rumble, because the last, how many years you want to go back now, 5 years, Brock would just come back around SummerSlam time and either come back as the Universal / WWE champion, and he would just be in hibernating following his retention of said title at WrestleMania, or he would come back and immediately insert himself into the World Championship picture. Now, I don't foresee Roman Reigns losing the championship, or plural, if it ultimately comes that, between now and SummerSlam. And you can't possibly think they'll go back to Roman and Brock again. You just have to hope, assume, pray, whatever verb you want to use, that is done and buried with. So between now and SummerSlam, are they going to be able to build a worthy enough opponent / program to bring Brock back and burn some of the matches off of his contract? Because that's how his contract works, right? It's by match or by appearance or
yeah,
so?
they have slated shows, a number of television appearances. They have a number of matches. Yeah, it's very specific on his contract from what I understand, yeah.
So let's go with the assumption that Roman Reigns is facing Drew McIntyre at SummerSlam for the Undisputed Championship. What else, as of right now, are you going to bring Brock back for and use one of those appearances or matches? And I can't think of one. You've already done him versus Bobby Lashley, as underwhelming as it is. You've already done him versus Seth Rollins. And after that, like, is there any opponent on the roster who's worthy of facing him? Like Omos, no thank you. I think like Omos is, I think I get what they're doing, but he's not a guy that I think that is really ever going to amount to anything. I don't know if you realize this about Omos, but when he wrestles, sometimes he smiles. Like, I don't know if you've caught that, but he has like a smile on his face while he's like trying to be angry and scary. And it's kind of takes, I don't know if you ever realized that, but like when he does his roar, like when he comes back down, he's like kind of has like this underlying smile. I'm just like, why is this guy smiling? Like, but anyway, that's neither here nor there. But back on the Brock topic, like, I just don't know if they'll have a worthy enough program for him in time to come back by SummerSlam.
Well, first of all, I will now notice this, and I will never not see it again. Is the Omos smile? It's probably because he's legitimately having a good time and forgetting that he's a heel and needs to never smile. But so the thing is with Brock, now this is completely fantasy booking on my part, and it will likely not happen. But it's not out of the realm of impossibility, and that is Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Brock Lesnar at next year's WrestleMania. And the reason I say that is, number one, Stone Cold Steve Austin came out of retirement. Nobody ever thought, including myself, including probably Steve Austin himself, ever thought that he would come out of retirement. By the way, I can't find his beer anywhere. The American Lager, it's sold out everywhere. So somebody, please send me a 6-pack. It's gone. It's completely gone. But that said, I know that seems a little bit far-fetched, and that's who wants to see that? Well, number one, Stone Cold is kind of now back in the mindset of being in a ring. He is assessing how his body feels. He knows mentally that he can do it. The crowd still is 1,000% behind him. And he recently said about 3 months ago, in a WWE kind of like rapid fire question segment, that who would you want to face that you never were able to face in your career? His immediate quick answer was Brock Lesnar. Immediate. And there is a lot of history there with them not actually having a match together. With the infamous walkout in 2002, they had a bit of a skirmish with him as the referee in 2004 at WrestleMania 20. Like there's a lot they could really build on, and they could tell a story from 20 years ago, and I think it'd be really well done. And Stone Cold would have much, much more time to prepare for this match than he did, which apparently was only 3 months to prepare for the Kevin Owens match. He would have, 11 months to prepare for this matchup with Brock Lesnar, which he would need all of it to prepare for Brock Lesnar with all the German suplexes and scary German suplexes he would probably take. And so I think there's something to be said for that. And that's really the only person that you could have, in my estimation, face Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania 39 in LA. I mean, outside of that, if you're looking at the current roster, like you said, Omos is probably the only one. I know you don't want to see it, but maybe Omos improves immeasurably this year. Maybe he does, and it's Omos versus Brock Lesnar next year because they already went to the well with Bobby. Seth, we've already seen. I mean, who the hell else? Edge? I mean, Edge versus Brock Lesnar? I mean, maybe Edge versus Brock Lesnar. But outside of that, yeah, they are very limited on Brock Lesnar opponents too. And God help us if it's Roman again.
I don't think it can be Roman again. And that's another kind of unfortunate byproduct of the way they booked their product up until WrestleMania. Is that you put Brock and Roman on this unattainable pedestal for the rest of the roster, and now nobody else is worthy with the exception of maybe Drew McIntyre. Because I do think that they've quietly done a really good job building Drew McIntyre back up. And I do think the crowd is really behind him, and I still do think that he is their top-level babyface for the foreseeable future. But I don't see any other competitor on the roster right now worthy of competing with either aside from Drew McIntyre. And like I said, it won't be Drew McIntyre. I mean, unless maybe they do that. Like, could they do a non-title match between Drew and Brock Lesnar and book someone else for Roman Reigns at SummerSlam?
Yeah, I think that I don't see why not. And to be honest, I mean, whoever they should look at this, and I'm sure they do, given how long Roman's reign, no pun intended, has been with the title. That they have to use this win, this victory, and this defeat on Roman's end with somebody they know they can use to springboard their career forward. Even if it's somebody that's already established like Drew. I've said it before, I said it again, that Drew being the one to end Roman's streak and take the belt, I would be fine with, because Drew is still got a lot of days ahead of him inside the ring. Fans respect him. It's believable. So Drew is a to me, the top candidate to beat Roman Reigns and finally take away his nearly 600-day run. But other than that, whoever beats Roman, it should be somebody that they can build on, that person could use and they could talk about, and it'd be a big moment for that person's career. That's why I never wanted Brock Lesnar to do it. I don't want The Rock to do it either. If The Rock's going to come back, it needs to be in a non-title match. I don't want the title on the line. So Roman better lose it prior to The Rock coming back if that ever happens assumingly at next year's WrestleMania. So, I mean, I don't know where I was going with that, but I there it is. I really don't remember what your question is. Sorry.
Oh, no, it was basically like, could they have Drew McIntyre versus Brock at SummerSlam and go with somebody else against Roman?
Yeah.
Well, look, for me, Drew makes the most sense to take the belt off of Roman Reigns because it would be like the most ultimate long-term booking. Because they first started clashing in, late 2018, early 2019, when the Shield was having their final run and Drew was with Bobby Lashley and Baron Corbin. Then they had the match at WrestleMania 35, which Roman won. Then they had the match at Survivor Series 2020, which Roman won. So you could book the whole, like, Roman's the only guy that Drew has not been able to defeat since really coming back to the WWE and all that. And like you said, is that, you know, the crowd is behind him. He's already established, so it wouldn't be like kind of like a leap of faith if you were going with a Braun Breaker, that you're just trying to legitimize him and end this historic reign all at once. That, like, I'm sure, like, I haven't seen a ton of Braun Breaker, but as much as people like him and as promising as he is in the ring, it would still be a risk. So it's just, to me, it's more a question of when as opposed to if Drew is the one to break this, because, you know, who else do they have? Like, he has not got, well, no, he technically has gone through Drew McIntyre as well at Survivor Series 2020, but that was in a non-title fashion. But then you also have the problem of Brock Lesnar. And yes, Stone Cold Steve Austin at this very moment is the only guy that I could really see it being worth the time of bringing Brock back. But this is, I guess, the only problem that I really have with the Roman Reigns run, because I have loved it for the most part, but it's just gotten to a point where, and you could throw Brock in this mix as well, is that Roman is on such a pedestal now, along with Brock Lesnar, that, like, any guy who steps to either of them is non-believable. And you could even throw a guy like John Cena into that category. Like, John Cena was the last 4 years or so since he became part-time, was always the guy they kind of kept in their back pocket. Like, okay, if we need a big level draw, we'll bring back Cena. But after his last appearance against Roman Reigns, which I think was just a glorified squash match, and then once SummerSlam went off the air, Brock Lesnar absolutely buried him and suplexed him like 20 times or whatever, I don't even think John Cena's a guy that you could bring back and kind of thrust into that role. Like, where do you think John Cena stands in all of this?
I don't think John Cena's had his last match. I think all of us agree that he does have a few left in him. He hasn't officially retired from anything. And if he were to come back and face Brock again, look, the thing is with John, while you look at his last match at SummerSlam and you're like, wow, yeah, that it wasn't super competitive on John's end. It was much to do about Roman and his dominance, and it helped push Roman forward and all that, which it did do. And then Brock came out and did his thing. But the thing is with John Cena, that was what, 6 months ago, however long it was. John Cena's so good on the mic that he could talk you back into wanting to see that again and make you believe that he could beat Brock Lesnar again because he's that good on the mic. So I have faith that John Cena in his promos, given how good he is, would make us care again and make us maybe believe that John Cena is the one to take him down. And solely because of how good he is on the microphone. So that's my thought. And one thing I'll ask you too, as we close things out, is the brand split going to die in 2022 sometime this year? Or do you think maybe there's an argument to be made it's kind of already dead, given the fact they're unifying belts now? Which, I mean, I think you and I are on the same page of typically less belts is good, even though they don't have a world champion on both shows, which maybe that's not so good. But the tag belts being unified, excellent. I think that's great. But with people just indiscriminately now coming over with no explanation, they were just invited over. Liv Morgan's on Raw. The Bloodline is on SmackDown or on Raw. People are just crossing over all the time. It's not even. It's not even like a big deal anymore to most people. You could argue it's kind of already dead. They want both. I think they want to have their cake and eat it too, where they have a brand split. They can say they have a brand split, which they follow 60% of the time. But when it's convenient, we don't explain why. But these people come over here. I think they want both, the best of both worlds, and hoping we don't care or don't notice that, hey, wait a minute, there's a brand split, right? What do you think?
I mean, it's trending in the direction that there's not a brand split. And the most telling, thing about that is the unification of belts. Now Roman wants the Usos to unify the tag team championships. I mean, I've always been a proponent of the brand split. I think it just increases the quality of the product. I think it gives you a reason to watch SmackDown. We've talked about this before, that maybe it will be a bit different this time now that Fox has the rights to SmackDown. Maybe it will be a different story. But traditionally, whenever there isn't a brand split, there is no reason to watch SmackDown. Raw always becomes the main cog in advancing storylines. Like we were talking about SmackDown from 2009 till 2016. Was there a reason to tune into SmackDown in those years? I think not. Like when the logo was SmackDown with the black X in the back and all that, I just think that there's way more bad as opposed to good that comes out of a non-brand split. But at the same time, if you're hell-bent on pushing one guy alone with sometimes Brock Lesnar in the mix as the top-tier main eventers, maybe it is for the best. Maybe they deem that they need Roman on both shows. I think that's exactly what this is about. But that being said, it seems that Roman on both shows may lead to the law of diminishing returns, right? Like the last two appearances he had on Raw, or let's just look at this since WrestleMania. On Raw, he basically told you to tune into SmackDown, and on SmackDown, with the exception of Shinsuke Nakamura coming out, he basically just told you to tune into Raw. Is that what it's going to be with Roman Reigns? Is it just going to be too much Roman Reigns? And I think it may be getting to that point because it does seem that his promos and his appearances are starting to become a little redundant. And I think that one of the biggest attributes or positives of the brand split is that it stops people from becoming redundant on television. It stops people from getting sick of certain wrestlers. It stops performers from being overworked and overexposed. So I think that it's trending towards it being completely dead. Maybe some wrestlers you'll see on Raw and SmackDown more. I think it'll be mostly the main storylines that you'll begin to see on both shows. I just think it's a very bad idea for several reasons.
Yeah, definitely trending that it's dead. I'd say it's on life support at best. I mean, again, they violated I think they went 2 weeks without violating the rules. I actually kept count this year of how long it would take before they just violated their own rule without explaining it. And I think it was Rey Mysterio who was the one that violated it. That just had him on SmackDown or Raw and he wasn't supposed to be there. But anyway, so I do think that there's a lot of benefit. You and I did an entire show on the brand split and why it's generally we landed on the impression that it was a good thing. And I think you and I were on the same page with that it's generally a good thing for talent. It gives talent more of an opportunity to shine when instead of just having one or two main storylines running through both shows, obviously it gives more talent more opportunities, which you and I are on board for. But in this case, yeah, I mean, they run the risk of overexposing Roman to the point of exhaustion, where like you said, where he's on SmackDown, he's exclusive to SmackDown, but now he's on both shows. And I think they are going to run that risk. But I think maybe they feel it's a risk they're willing to take given maybe what they're seeing with the numbers on ratings, maybe with the minute-by-minute ratings they're seeing with Roman Reigns, every time he pops on the screen, ratings go up. Maybe if they're seeing that, I don't have the rating minute-by-minute sheet in front of me, maybe that's what they're seeing, and if the numbers pan out, I guess I would do the same thing too. I mean, even if fans are going, oh my God, more Roman Reigns, if more viewers are tuning in, I'd be like, well, sorry guys, the numbers say I got to do this, and I get that. I understand the business part of it. And that, I'm not saying that to be true. I'm just saying maybe that's a possibility. Now, if he's on Raw and SmackDown every single week, I think that is going to be a problem for the Usos as well, because they're attached to Roman by proxy. And if they become the unified champions, of tag team champions, we're going to see the Usos a whole hell of a lot more. And people have been talking about them also taking all the gold, meaning the Intercontinental and the United States Championship. I mean, I don't think that'll happen, but if they did that, then yeah, everything will circle around and orbit around the bloodline. Everything is just going to orbit around them, and I think it'll get to the point, if they continue to do this down this path, where we see them all the time and every show seems to center on, oh my God, Roman's going to tell us the next step. He's going to come out and tell us this and that. I think that fans will go from, this is a great storyline, it's genuine heat, Roman's a great heel, to, okay, I want to watch something else. They do run that risk of people taking that step, because as great of a heel as he's been, and this run has been legendary for his career, they're walking a very tight rope already of people going, that's enough of Roman, can we just do something else? This isn't good heat, this is, I want to watch something else heat. And there's a difference. People will argue with me, there's not. There's a difference, because when people tune out of your product, that your viewership goes down, which means your revenue dollars go down. So that's what I think.
Yeah, and I think that WWE, or more specifically Vince, realized that they caught lightning in a bottle with Roman Reigns and the tribal chief gimmick, and they realized that it's worked and gotten over with people, but now it's getting to the point where, like, okay, are you just overexposing Roman like you did in 2015 and 2016? And albeit it's in a much more palatable character and storyline, and it is a very good storyline and all that, eventually it's not going to work anymore. Like, even with Stone Cold Steve Austin, like, I don't think we ever saw Stone Cold Steve Austin exposed this much for this long, doing the same thing and saying the same thing, and everything orbiting around Stone Cold Steve Austin. Like, and I guess, like, look, I'm not trying to compare the two, and I'm not saying that Stone Cold Steve Austin would have had people turn on them, but even Stone Cold Steve Austin said that maybe they didn't want it to be stale, and that's the reason why they turned him heel in 2001. Obviously that didn't work out, but he even had the thought process of, like, this act might be getting stale. And you also had, like, The Undertaker to lean on, and Triple H, who got his run with the title. You sprinkled in the Cinderella story of Mankind winning the championship, The Rock's meteoric rise in late 1999, and the year of The Rock was basically the year 2000. Like, it wasn't just all Steve Austin all the time, and I feel like it's kind of getting to the point where it's just, for as good as he is, it's just all Roman all the time. And, you look at some of the most memorable WWE championship runs of the last 20 years or so, like, it wasn't for so long of just doing the same thing. It was very short and sweet and sprinkled in here and there. And I just fear that they're taking something with Roman that's very good and very over and truly one of the best runs of the last decade or so, and just trying to force feed it and turn it into something so much bigger than it actually is.
Well, I think they'd argue, well, that's our job. We're supposed to make it bigger than it is. It's all about perception is reality. But the problem with this is, I mean, you alluded to it, is that, again, people are going to get very sick very quickly of Roman. I mean, I'm already hearing it from it. I mean, listeners are telling me about it. I'm seeing it all over social media. People are just sick and tired of Roman's boring.
What about you personally?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, when you're comparing to Stone Cold Steve Austin, and of course, I mean, the Attitude Era is just highly, it's regarded as the golden era of wrestling. I mean, followed closely by the Ruthless Aggression era. But I think that when you're comparing the two, number one, again, Stone Cold wasn't overexposed because, number one, it was a 2-hour Raw. Back then, there wasn't a weekly SmackDown until the, what was it, 2000 or so. No, yeah.
Late 99.
Late 99. So Austin had a good year and a half of just, you only saw Austin once a week. It was a 2-hour show, and they sprinkled Austin through the show enough to where it hooked you. Usually he'd open the show or being involved in a main segment, and then it would eventually translate to the end of the show where he'd be in the main event. And the thing is, he was so over, and he had a Hall of Fame cast of characters to work with, that it was kind of a bit of an exception to the rule. But 2-hour Raw, no SmackDown for part of his career, I think helped. And so when you talk about Roman Reigns and him being overexposed, I think it already kind of is happening. I'm hearing it now. You're probably hearing it now. But personally, how do I feel? I think that Roman Reigns is teetering on overexposure. He's right at the line right now. He's at the doorway of overexposure, and he's about to step into it. And I think he will step into it. Why? Because WWE has a long history of when they find something that works, they continue with it, but then they continue with it until it's dead and buried, and they resurrect it and kill it again. That's just what they do. That's just what they do with something when they know it works. They completely destroy it by just ramming it over and over and over down your throat. And that's just what they do. So do I think Roman's going to be on both shows consistently? I do. And I don't know for how long, assumingly until he loses the championship, which at the earliest, you and I have both conceded, is probably in 4 months at SummerSlam against Drew McIntyre. I don't see him losing it beforehand. I don't care who the hell challenges him, from Shinsuke to a recycled opponent between Shinsuke and SummerSlam. But that's what I envision is Roman's right there right now, and I think he's not quite overexposed, but boy is he close, and I think they're going to do it, and I think people are going to get sick of it, and we're all just going to have to go, this is just WWE booking, guys. This just is what they do.
It's sad too, because they have something really good, and honestly, I think he probably should have dropped it at this year's WrestleMania to Drew McIntyre, and then you could have put the belt back on him, but that's a whole different angle and a whole new
when you think about it,
hole.
why the hell they bring Brock back just to lose? Like, Brock lost every single match he had with Roman Reigns. The only matches he won since he came back at SummerSlam was against Austin Theory, Madison Square Garden, that was not televised, and the triple threat or fatal 5-way or whatever the hell it was where he won the WWE Championship just to get to Roman, to drop the belt to Roman. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So, it's amazing to have Brock to come back just to lose. I mean, the reason Brock was brought back was a tool and a stepping stone for Roman Reigns' belt. I mean, that's it. Just to have him try to validate Roman Reigns even further, which I would have kept Brock the hell out of it. And like you said, had Drew and Roman at this year's WrestleMania. You and I thought that was going to be the main event for months leading up to it until Brock came back.
But that's what I was saying leading up to WrestleMania, is that the entire WrestleMania was, well, the main event scene, of course, was built around trying to legitimize Roman Reigns as like one of the greatest of all time, and you can't force that. And I hate to be the guy of like, well, back in my day, which is crazy because I'm only 27, but like back in my day watching wrestling, you weren't told that a historic match was happening weeks in advance. Like, I remember the build to WrestleMania 2017 in 2001. Did we know that Rock versus Stone Cold Steve Austin at the Houston Astrodome was going to be the biggest WrestleMania match of all time, in my opinion? Did we know that WrestleMania was going to be forever regarded as the greatest WrestleMania ever? Like, it's just, you can't force feed these things. And I think that what they've done over the last 10 months or so, starting with John Cena, to be honest, is that they've just taken guys, and most notably Cena and Brock, and sacrificed them to try and promote Roman Reigns as opposed to just trying to make it organic. And I don't think that I would feel any different about Roman Reigns' run let's say I'm looking back on his title run 5 years from now. Would I feel any different about it had he lost to Drew McIntyre at this year's WrestleMania as opposed to beating Brock Lesnar in the unification match and the greatest match in the history of the planet? Probably not. I just think that it was very short-sighted booking, and you sacrificed an opportunity to really make a guy like Drew. And then you could have had Drew versus Roman in rematches going all the way into the summer. Like, people forget that, like, the Batista Triple H rivalry, and this is just one example, was a program that started at WrestleMania, and then they've clashed at Backlash, and then they went on to the Hell in a Cell match at Bad Blood 04. So, look, I don't know. I think it was very short-sighted, and in the end, it's going to do more harm than good.
It does seem like it just was. I don't know. I think that this was not a needed victory for Roman. When I look back at this year's WrestleMania, I mean, I don't care how many times they told me it's going to be the biggest match ever at WrestleMania, which again it just pissed me off right from the beginning when they called it that. It's a total joke, and it was not just a marketing slogan. I also think that they were trying to repeat it, thinking the more they say it, maybe somebody will believe us that it's the biggest WrestleMania match of all time, to try to make it bigger than it actually was, because fans were like, we've seen this before. Okay, we've seen them fight many times before, 3 times at WrestleMania. We've seen this, and they're trying to do anything they could to
will it into existence,
to brainwash it. Yeah, like if they say it enough times, maybe it'll actually become true of being the biggest WrestleMania match. And number one, it did not deliver on match quality at all. I don't think it was god awful, but it was just like, nah, it was okay. You know what you're going to get with these two. And then Roman Reigns wins. Brock goes back to Saskatchewan behind his 12-foot fence until like August or whatever. And you know that's what's going to happen. And now you have Roman Reigns back taking himself down several pegs to go down to whatever's left on SmackDown that he can scrape up and defend his belt against, which is Shinsuke. And I hate to say that about Shinsuke, but he has not exactly been the focal point of WWE since he faced AJ Styles in the main event a few years ago at WrestleMania. I mean, that's just a fact. So, yeah, I don't think that this did anything for Roman's career this past year. I wouldn't have thought any different about his run. I would have been like, that was a great run. It was an excellent job by all parties involved. It felt like the right time. Let's give Drew the belt, and then have Roman in chase mode, beating him down, and then have several rematches. I don't get it. But all right. Well, any final thoughts here? We're going to close things out.
No, I'm actually kind of getting upset thinking about this, but that's a whole new different rabbit hole that we could tackle next week.
I know. I'm actually like pissed off. Like I'm sitting here like, man, I didn't realize I felt this deeply about this particular rivalry and Roman and the way WWE's been portraying things. And here comes the overexposure, guys. It's coming.
It's happening.
Yeah, as we speak right now, we are about to cross the threshold into I cannot handle Roman Reigns on my screen anymore, and that's not a good thing. I don't care if somebody want to argue, teal heat. No, not when people want to, turn on, I don't know, whatever people watch these days. I don't even know what the cool kids watch anymore on Netflix.
Vikings Valhalla. That's what you got to watch.
I've never seen that. What's it called?
Vikings Valhalla. I would highly suggest it.
On Netflix, not Hulu or anything?
No, Netflix.
Okay.
It's a Netflix original.
Okay. Well, you guys heard it here first too, so I will check that out. If that's what the cool kids are watching, I want to make sure I get to sit at the lunch table with the kids I can feel cool with, and because I have no idea. My wife and I just watch reruns of Big Bang and Friends and Office. Like, there's just a constant cycle that we all go through because we're, millennials, and we watch our shows to feel, I don't know. We just watch our comfort shows for whatever reason. And so cool. Yeah, maybe I'll check that out. And everybody go check out the show that Anthony did regarding the Black Wedding in 99. I think it was 99. I don't think it was 98 or 99. You think I'd know this. I don't know. One of those 2 years where Stone Cold saved Stephanie McMahon and showed a different side of himself after Vince McMahon was just about to reveal himself as the higher power in about a month later. But so, yeah, great stuff. And Anthony, do you want to share social media?
Yeah, as always, you can get me on Twitter at AdaMarco25, and catch me every Friday right here on the WWE podcast.
Awesome, very good. And you and I got to go blow off some steam now that we're diving into WWE's secrets, and we're diving into their logic, and we're not happy. But all right, buddy, you have a good night. We'll talk next week.
Yeah, man, take care.
All right.
Thanks for listening to the WWE podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss a show, or head to WWEpodcast.com. And for all of these shows ad-free, head over to patreon.com/WWE podcast. Until then, we'll see you next time.